I think our job is to not hold that physically in our bodies. And some people do hold it physically. It can create nausea, lack of sleep, that sort of stuff, all based on external chaos that is completely out of our control.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think that's a good perspective that we often, all of us need to do is sometimes when you feel that happening, take a step back and put some perspective on it. And it doesn't mean you devalue anything that's creating that for you, but maybe you decide how much value you need to give that. Do you need to give it a value of 10 and it is chaos and crazy? Or really was 10 when something else traumatic happened in your life and this is probably just a 2? Welcome to EnVibe Live Conversations with Amy Parker and Cheryl Dunn. By tuning in, you are joining a community that will inspire you to increase balance, wellness, and joy in your life. We'll offer expert information and insightful conversations to help us on our journey to live more EnVibe. For more information and articles, remember to also check out our website at envibelife.com. That's EnVibelife.com. We're grateful that you're here.
Hello and welcome to the EnVibe Life Conversations podcast with Amy Parker and Cheryl Dunn. We're so excited to be back.
Yes.
So I know that our podcasts have been out on our website every week, but we actually took a break from filming for a few weeks over the holidays. And the last couple times we filmed were at Miraval for our retreat at the beginning or middle of December. So since we've been sitting in this room recording a podcast has been 3 or 4 weeks. It's the longest we've gone in a year now.
Yes.
Without recording a podcast. So it feels good to be back. A little nervous to be back doing it. Like, oh, do we have the material? What are we going to talk about? But so what we are wanting to discuss today is we just feel like we can't start the year or start any other conversation without addressing just the chaos that's going on in our world right now. First of all, in the United States, we have all sorts of craziness and madness going on in Washington and in the nation with our transition of power and our political situation. And we're sitting here on January the 12th, I guess it is. So we are in the middle of chaos and uncertainty on what the next couple weeks are going to look like, which is just so bizarre and such an unfamiliar place, I think, for most American citizens to be in. We're not used to this kind of tumultuous behavior in the nation's capital. And then, of course, COVID is still very, very real worldwide and in many places, including our community. I think the numbers are actually on the rise. Seeing a prevalence of it. And it just seems like there's a global or national or community-wide anxiety and stress right now.
When it's a change of a year, from when 20 to 21, I'm just using those numbers as an example. That change of the year also brings a little angst or anxiety because people almost put pressure on themselves that now I have to make better choices.
We just made all those resolutions we're trying to keep up with already. Yeah.
And that angst creates an internal anxiety or an internal chaos, right? Never mind that it's happening globally and it's very specific to this year. It happens every year on a smaller scale. I just think this year it's very amplified.
Well, because it's all about change in the unknown.
Yes.
That's the commonality between all those things we just discovered. And now, not only are these unprecedented and huge things happening in our communities, even our, huge global community, they've been going on for so long that we're just all already exhausted from a, nervous system standpoint, an emotional system standpoint. And, a lot of us just feeling like even we're living the same day over and oh, look, working from home again,
Groundhog Day, right.
with my whole family here doing the same thing and going to buy more toilet paper again, whatever the situation is. We're just already so strung out, and then throw these just unimaginable things in the middle of it. And I think that's what's been going on now, although we're getting a little bit used to COVID, which is crazy. Like, I find myself thinking, what was it like when I didn't have to wear a face mask everywhere?
Yes.
I watch an old television show, like reality shows, and see people just walking around. Meeting each other, shaking hands, and hugging each other. And I think, how bizarre is that? And then I think, God, how fast have I come to that new normal?
We quickly got conditioned to doing things differently. Well, they say it only takes 3 weeks to start a new habit. Right? And we've been doing this a lot longer than 3 weeks.
Which in some ways is good, and in some ways is sad. You know, in some ways I think we've adapted so that we can move forward in a different way, maybe an unwelcome way, but still put one foot in front of another.
It was interesting. I was at a doctor's visit this morning, and she was like, maybe next year when I see you for this checkup, we won't have these masks on. And I thought, and maybe we will.
Right.
You know? I mean, it is what it is. There's not a lot I can do about that. And I don't feel heavily one way or the other towards it, but it was interesting, you know. But I guess if you really want them off, it's a hopeful thought to have. But yeah, it's very interesting with all that's going on and how much we've handled this year. And maybe that's part of the chaos too, is we get to a point where you're like, oh, I can't do it anymore. Or you think you can't, right?
Yeah.
And I think that some people are calling that COVID fatigue, if they're implying it to just that particular thing.
Well, and we all have those seminal moments in our lives, or those dark moments in our lives that make us really look around and evaluate ourselves in our lives, and reevaluate maybe ourselves in our lives. Maybe some of that's going on both personally and globally right now. Oh,
I definitely think so. I think some people might have done it a whole lot in the beginning of COVID, but I do believe that that's still, like, you naturally do that at the change of the year, but it's just on a deeper level. It's big,
Well, and so you were sharing with me before we started recording that you're just seeing a lot of personal stress too, whether it's in friends or clients or family members.
Right. Where little things become big things very quickly. And that's kind of one of the signs. I think that, your body will sometimes tell you it's stressed out before you even know you're stressed out.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely, it's interesting, me in particular, maybe this is more information than our audience wants to hear, but I will, and this doesn't happen often, maybe 3 or 4 times my entire life, and I'll get a fever blister, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, why do I have this? Why do I have this? And I'm sitting there going, what's going on? Why do I have this? And lo and behold, I'm like, well, you just had two stressful weeks, right? And then that'll come up on my lip. And remember, I had it about the time my kids were going back to school this year, and I hadn't had that in years.
Wow.
So that's a little sign that what my body will do.
And I've been breaking out a little bit.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Which could be the mask a little bit, but
mask got me.
But I don't think that's solely it either.
But also, like at the clinic, neck and shoulder issues. We see a lot more neck and shoulder issues during this time of year because people are carrying extra stress. And that's just a normal year, not a COVID, tumultuous in Washington year. During Christmas, holidays, this sort of time of year, people start to have a lot of neck and shoulder pain. And that's another way that your body starts to tell you, hello, we need to do some other things because you're stressing me out. And it starts to tell you through those things. Or some people will have big things that happen with their bodies, like they trip and fall and tear and break something,
Yeah, I just did.
Amy's like, I do know that really well.
Not to throw me under the bus, but Yeah, I did when I was out of town over the Christmas holiday and just randomly standing up from a long dinner. So I'd been sitting a long time. When I stood up, kind of had that kind of pins and needles feeling in my leg. When I put weight on it, I just went down on the ground and I twisted my ankle worse than I ever have in my whole life.
Black and blue.
Black and blue, completely swollen. I've been seeing Stephen and Cheryl for the last 2 weeks continually. And so starting to make some progress, which is good. But
in the beginning, it was bad.
It was really bad. Yeah. And that was so unusual for me. But you know what? That also brings up...
Had it been me, it wouldn't have been unusual. But
that also brings up, just to some people, for those of you who haven't discovered this yet on the website, Cheryl has started a series of articles where she talks about the chakra system, and she starts at the root and is working her way up and just gives a little bit of an explanation and then shows how you can move your body to free up energy in those areas. And I think this is some of the best work you've ever done. Personally, I think it's so good. And I don't know anyone else out there doing this. Like, I read everything out there or anything that comes my way. I haven't seen anyone else doing this in this way. So if you're finding some instability, like for me, the root chakra or that instability feeling, which led to a trip and fall situation, but there's some exercises there to build some additional stability and move some of that negative energy out.
Or I think if you flip that a little bit and you start to think of if you're having aches and pains in your body, start to look at which chakra that is. And so maybe the physical stuff that you're currently feeling, there is a different side of that to look at. There's a mental spiritual side to look at. Why do I have pain in my sacrum for 15 years? Right? That's kind of the questions I'm trying to answer with those articles, is that people look at a bigger picture of, you know, what's going on mentally, physically, spiritually.
Mind, body, spirit.
Mind, body, spirit, how they're all connected. And just having my exercise background, that's why I wanted to start all of those articles explaining each particular chakra, and then wrap it up with, okay, if you're having issues in your second chakra, then these are some good exercises or releases or breathing techniques that are going to help you through dealing with this stuff. So it kind of comes from a perspective of whether you are a mover or not a mover. None of the exercises are really hard. I want them to be mindful. But so say you've never exercised, but you do have chronic low back pain, right? Or chronic mid back pain, that kind of stuff, or your hips always hurt. Go read the article so that you can be like, oh, well, that does have to do with what's going on at home, or what's going on, you know, with transitioning through things in life. And transitioning is hard.
But here's what's cool about this, that we so often think with the mind-body connection that we can use the mind to heal the body, but it can work the opposite way too.
Yes.
You can move the body to help yourself emotionally as well.
It goes both ways. I often tell people movement is medicine, and that gets translated as move and you're going to heal whatever physical ailment you have. Being in a physical therapy clinic, that's how that gets translated. But definitely the movement can help whatever mental issues you have.
Well, and I want to hold that thought because I want to get to it again in a minute. But something else you said brought up a thought to me when you said, you know, you might have had pain in a certain area for 10 years or 15 years or since you were a child. Which even is common. Who knows, right?
Super common.
But I think that's another thing that's going on right now. Like when you mentioned that little things are triggering people in big ways emotionally, it's because we all have past traumas.
Yes.
And then we hold memories of those traumas. And when we are under such a state of chaos and anxiety and tension as we are now, it reminds you of those deep-seated anxieties and traumas you have. I think that happens too, and it happens emotionally and it happens physically.
Definitely. And for someone to hold pain for 15 years, that might sound like it's crazy that would happen. And not to throw men under the bus, but the average male will have to have pain for 10 to 15 years before he will seek help for that.
Wow.
And usually it's their significant other saying, I'm done hearing it.
Yeah.
And we'll push them into getting help. But isn't that interesting? But yeah, it definitely, it'll manifest that way. And there are many ways to go about healing it.
Well, so I think the first thing to do is to ground yourself or center yourself. And you do give some tips and exercises on this in one of your articles.
That's the root chakra.
But that remembering that all is well. Yes. Like I know that last week when there was craziness going on in Washington, that was one of the things that we and our family had to step back and say, it's like, but you know what? We're still fine.
Yes.
Like we're
you
fine
do have to
here.
Do that often.
And trust this is, even if the system looks absolutely insanely crazy right now, I do have faith that it's been a pretty magical system to avoid things like non-peaceful transitions of power and things like that since its inception. You know, 1776, we've done a very good job of having safeguards in place. And so even though they're being majorly stress tested at the moment, I still do have an amount of trust that all will be well and all is well. And so, you know, remembering that here, like, I will still sit and have dinner with my family tonight. I will still let my dogs out at 7 tomorrow morning, like I always do, you know, keeping in mind that I do still have my home and my family and control of this situation, and it's not being threatened.
And I
tomorrow.
also feel like, too, you can, even if you don't have trust in the system, that it's going to be peaceful transition, that's okay, too.
It is.
It's okay. You can sit back and say, all is well, too, with that. So I think either way it goes, it doesn't, I think our job is to not hold that physically in our bodies. And some people do hold it physically. It can create nausea, lack of sleep, that sort of stuff, all based on external chaos that is completely out of our control. You know? And I think that's a good perspective that we often, all of us need to do is sometimes when you feel that happening, take a step back and put some perspective on it. And it doesn't mean you devalue anything that's creating that for you, but maybe you decide how much value you need to give that. Do you need to give it a value of 10 and it is chaos and crazy? Or really was 10 when something else traumatic happened in your life and this is probably just a 2? You know, so then maybe you give yourself a grading scale and think of a trauma that happened in your life and that was pretty traumatic. Give that a 10. And that's a quick tool when you're out and you're so aggravated at that person in the grocery store. Go, okay, what number is this? Is this a 5? Is this a 7? You know, where is it on that anger, whatever your tendency is when you have chaos, anger, fear, you know, whatever you tend to go to is your like angst emotion. You know, give yourself a tool and give it a number on how you can, you know, where it really is in your life at that point.
And then I'd say if it is a 10, if it is an 8, if it is a 5 even the big global stuff, national stuff, find some ways to address it. Like maybe journaling, which we talk about, talking to a friend. You know, there's meditation and things like that, but allow yourself to grieve it and to understand you need some help with it. Just like if you had something personally in your house happening. I think if you, as you're able to meet it head on so that you remember you have control over how you're going to let that enter your body and your emotional state, maybe then it won't keep you awake at night, or maybe not as long. Right. Or as many nights, or, you know, maybe you can at least abate it a little bit.
I feel like one of the often things that I talk about in my home, talk about to myself personally, to my spouse, to my children, the only thing we truly have control over is ourselves and how we feel things and how, that's all it. That's it. That's all you have control over. If the boys are fighting and one hits the other, you can't stop him from doing what he's doing to you, but you can control how it makes you feel. You can control if you choose to stay in the situation or if you choose to fight back. You only have control over yourself. And that's on a little small scale of
have control over yourself.
Boys fighting. But you can think about that in a bigger, if something really gets you. You can choose, what if the first reaction is for it to just really unnerve every piece of you? Take a step back and be like, okay, I can choose for this not to get me like this. And what are my tools to help me calm down out of this, right? And it kind of this always goes back to, I tell you how I drop my son off and I go, choose joy. And now it's such a joke. Oh. They all make fun of me. Choose joy. I hope they hear my voice saying it whenever something's when they're mad at their teacher or something. Choose joy. Yeah. But you do. That's your only choice. You can't, as much as you want to control somebody else or control a situation.
Or even control your own emotional state. It can be.
You can't sometimes control it in the beginning, but you can acknowledge that it's there and then come with the tools to help you manage it.
Well, so let's talk about some of those tools, because the one thing I do feel like is we're going to have a few rocky weeks. I don't know.
Of course.
Maybe it won't be, but I feel like we're going to have more ups and downs, even if it's just verbal bouts or jabbing at one another. So first of all, that's one thing. And I know I have found that this is something I've had to do because I'm one of those 24-hour news kinds of people. But in recent years, it's gone down so much. And in the last few weeks, even the weeks leading up to the election, I found I had to just hardly keep the news on at all. Say, I'll allow myself this 1 hour in the morning when I have my coffee and I'm working my crossword puzzle. And so I put the news on, check the business channel. What are the stocks going to do? What are people saying? And then maybe a little bit in the evening while I'm cooking dinner, I'll watch the nightly news, and that's it. And I'll read.
That's a ton more news than I watch.
Yeah, but I'm a news junkie. I would do the 24-hour thing.
You censor what you want your children to see because you're trying to protect them. If they're little kids, you're censoring that. Put yourself in that kind of respect. Respect yourself enough to censor what you're going to expose yourself to.
So one of my spiritual teachers, says she treats herself as if she were a baby. Yes. If I wouldn't let a baby watch it, I'm not going to let myself watch it. And so maybe that's not your level, but come up with a level for yourself and say, what am I going to allow in? And take control of your situation.
Because if you think about it, there's this shock and awe factor that people stop and stare at. Right? It's like driving by a car wreck. Your tendency is to stop and stare at it. So if they're trying to get you to watch everything, they're going to shock and awe you, And so if you just don't turn it on or make conscious efforts to I'm going to go look at this time for only this amount of time, just to keep up with what is going on. You don't have to totally isolate yourself, but, create some boundaries with yourself.
That's great. Again, set standards for yourself and say, that's a way you can feel in control of the situation. Yes. I'm in control of what I allow in and when I allow it in. And some days you may want more and some days you don't. And that's your choice. But you do have the choice.
Or periods over your life. I used to love horror movies. Now, no way, not in a million years. I can't do it. It creates a different thing inside of me these days where I'm just no way.
Me too. It's assaultive. I can't do anything very graphic. I just don't handle it well. I just don't.
Right. Exactly.
I sit cringed under a quilt while I'm watching anything if it's even
I don't like
too
the
violent.
Feeling that it gives me inside. And so I try and stick to more comedies.
And so, that's a good... Laughter's a good medicine. Maybe introduce that in or bring that in.
Laughter is so important. I did have the luxury of seeing some old friends from high school this weekend. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. And one person made a comment that this was the best mental therapy they had had
Aw.
ever, so that laughter is important.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. It could have been them laughing at me falling, because I did fall this weekend. I hadn't told you that story yet.
Well, luckily your ankle's intact.
Yeah.
So
maybe not other parts of me, but my ankles are.
And then definitely all of the different tools we talk about for stress relief. And we have a good article there, from journaling to meditation, belly breathing, or breathing into your abdomen.
Mm-hmm. I think we have one on mindful movement. So if you choose to use movement as your sort of relief from the chaos, I know some people tend to use that. They need to just, if something, they kind of like shock themselves out of that anxiety by going for a hard run, right? That's a tool that some people could use, right? Where the other person might choose to go, okay, I am so wrapped up right now with this anxiety, I need to go to a yoga class, right? That it's different. You need to figure out what works for you, and maybe experiment with that. I do a lot of running when I'm in Austin, but when we were at Miraval and we did yoga every day,
it felt so good.
It felt so good.
I know.
Granted, we were eating good. Yeah. We were sleeping good. I mean, there were multiple factors.
But that's a good end. And we are at the beginning of the year where a lot of people have made resolutions. Maybe honor your body and take care of your body. You can control what you put into it when it's food and your exercise. Content. Even if some of the information that's coming to you, you can't completely control. And,
you can control how much you watch it.
You control how much you watch it, but we need to be informed. So we're going to get that, but you might still feel better and sleep better if you do control those things. You can,
or maybe don't watch the news late at night before bed.
Yeah, that's probably a good tip for anyone.
That's a really good tip. Watch it earlier in the day, and then say, okay, I've watched it. Now I'm going to go cook dinner, or I'm going to do whatever. Those sort of tools help with that anxiety of what's going on in the world. Yeah. And the All Is Well tool, I think, is one of our...
That's my all-time favorite.
All-time favorite, go-to, use it all the time.
Yeah.
All is well.
And I've been saying that a lot the last week especially. Just, that's how I kind of ground and pull. First of all, that's a mantra I use during meditation. And I really do think sort of like a muscle memory or an emotional memory. If you do something or say something while you're in that calm and still state, then just that word or maybe a certain hand motion can pull you back there. When you're in the middle of something really difficult, breathing can do that as well, I think. But it also, I think, reminds me again in that moment. So I'm watching craziness on TV, but then I look around, like let the dog on my lap. Cooking dinner, great smells coming out of the kitchen, whatever it is, beautiful home, all of those things. Like I am well, all is well right now. And so, just grounding with that. And I really do, I don't know, I believe it. I think I again, as a student of history and government and a political junkie, I have no idea yet what 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now we're going to say about this time period, but I think there will be some profound,
be in the history books.
Profound takeaways that come from it and changes that come from it.
It's fascinating. So you could think of it as that. We're watching a TV show.
We're watching history right now.
We are watching history.
That's true. And it's not necessarily comfortable.
No. But, it's a good way to kind of pay attention. If you think of watching it, I'm watching history. Okay, I'm going to pay attention a little bit more. Right? Or maybe you want to disassociate for it, but you end up seeing it. Maybe kids who like, oh, it feels like I'm watching one of those new shows on TV that talks about all these people. Just a little disassociation tool that you could use. Maybe that's not as good if you're, it's not a reality sort of perspective, but it is a tool,
And then, I'd say kind of like we said about the food, if there's anything else you can add positive into your life, maybe it's fun. Maybe it's some books on mind, body, spirit. Maybe it's a great work of fiction that's just fun for you. or
fiction
just
books.
add some things in that are uplifting and counter those frequencies of anxiety and worry and stress.
Call your girlfriend on the phone, whatever.
And allow yourself the time to do those things.
Yes.
Say, okay, I need to make sure that each day I do some things that are positive and uplifting and beautiful for me, even if it's a few minutes.
But that's really the only gift you can give yourself is the gift of time. Time.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. So I hope all of this information helps you deal with the chaos that's going on in our world today.
And know we're all in it together.
We're all in it together.
Even though Cheryl and I talk so much about being in these Zen states and tranquility and everything else, we're
dealing with it too.
We're dealing with it. We're feeling it. And we're calling each other, bouncing ideas about
what's going on, what we're hearing.
And ways to deal with it. Okay, I think I need to eat a little differently, or I think I need to add more yoga, or whatever it is. We've been brainstorming a lot of that too.
I heard someone describe all of this as there's a big storm and we're all in it. We're all just in different boats. And so you don't know what's happening in the other person's boat, but guess what? They're in the same storm you are. So
I don't think anyone isn't stressed about it. That's correct. For sure.
I also heard that sometimes those thoughts that drive you crazy, it's like if you look in the sky and there's all these clouds, right? But beyond the clouds is the sun. Well, the sun is our soul and us, really. And the clouds are just the thoughts that are going through. So the more you can push that chaos thought out of the way, the sun will shine.
Well, and then that's one of the last things I want to leave with is just know that anything you do to elevate your well-being helps those around you also. And so if you want to think about how can I help the craziness I see on my television right now, it's not selfish for you to elevate yourself, because, an elevated, beautiful emotional state can spread just as fast as an elevated state of anxiety.
And that's maybe all we can do for the chaos that's going on, because we don't have control. So that's what you can do. And that goes back with you can choose your emotions.
Prayer, connection, creativity. Put out there.
Awesome.
Okay, so thank you all for letting us vent a little bit and bring this into our community, because we don't want to dwell on negatives, but we don't want to ignore them either. And we know it's, an extremely anxiety-ridden and stressful time for a lot of people. And I think
we're all dealing with it.
Know that we're all dealing with it. You're not alone. We're in it together. And there are things you can do to get through the days.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to EnVibe Live Conversations. For more information and to join our community, be sure to check out our website at envibelive.com. We look forward to sharing with you.